To tell the story of the Great Battle of Little Bighorn, we must start with some minor events that helped begin this historical battle. The Battle of Little Bighorn was part of the larger Great Sioux War, which occurred between 1876 and 1877. The war was declared by the U.S. government on the Indian tribes on February 8th. Sometime in May, with the great tribe growing, Sitting Bull conducted a ritual called a sun dance to ask God what to do with the soldiers coming. For 2 days he danced, and on the second day he passed out and saw a vision. And in the vision, God said, "They have no ears." Sitting Bull interpreted this as a great victory for his people. But God also said, the Indians must not scalp, loot, or pillage from the dead once the battle was over. Then in late May, the expedition, nearly 4,000 strong, American soldiers, militia, and Indian scouts all gathered to launch a campaign against the native hostiles. General Terry, as well as Custer, would march from Fort Lincoln. General Crook would march from Fort Fetterman, while Colonel Gibbon would march from Fort Ellis. But then, on June 17th, the Lakota chief Crazy Horse ambushed and defeated General Crook's column at the Battle of the Rosebud. Crook suffered 28 dead and 46 wounded, while the coalition Indians lost 26 dead and 80 wounded. While this battle was somewhat inconclusive, Crook decided to save his wounded and pull back rather than continue on, and as a result, the Indians won a massive battle, but not the great battle that Sitting Bull had promised. On June 25th, Custer arrived on the battlefield early ahead of General Terry, and seeing a perfect opportunity to strike and win a great victory, possibly securing his nomination for president in the future, decided to launch an attack. Custer divided his force into 5 groups. His personal force would consist of 210 men. 2 smaller units, likely about 60 men each, were commanded by Captains Yates and Ware. 2 other units were commanded by Major Marcus Reno, roughly 120 men, and Captain Benteen with roughly 100 men. Probably at around 2 p.m., Custer and Reno's forces moved out. Custer moved along one side of a hill to launch a surprise attack from a northern part, while Reno moved up, hoping to surprise them from the south. However, Custer didn't move as fast as Reno. Reno, when he formed his men up to prepare to charge, a force of 500 Indian warriors charged after him. Realizing he was heavily outnumbered, Reno hastily fell back and was essentially routing. Meanwhile, Custer continued to move up, unaware of this. Reno, with his force scattering in a rout, formed on what's now Reno Hill and prepared a small defense against the oncoming rushing of warriors. Meanwhile, Custer, likely hearing the gunshots from Reno's force, believed that they had caught the enemy off guard and formed his men up and charged down into the Indian village. However, once they'd arrived at the rear of the village, Custer realized that these Indians were not part of the main force, and as the Indians charged at his force, he ordered his men to fall back and retreat. Eventually, he and his men fell back to what's now Calhoun Hill, and they formed up their own defensive circle against the Indians. At the same time of Custer's retreating, Yates and Ware heard shots firing and decided to reinforce Custer's position. Custer's force was still in disarray and getting worse as the Indians began dismounting and fought close quarters combat, techniques that they were excellent in fighting. Finally, Benteen, having received word from Custer to reinforce his line, marched out. But instead of reaching Custer, he spotted Reno's force, and so decided to attack the Indians and reinforce Reno. Captain Yates did try to reinforce Custer, but unfortunately he was engaged by Indian forces and was beaten back. Captain Ware successfully reinforced Reno's position, while Benteen was also making his way up there. Wave after wave of Indian attacks continued, but the Reno-Benteen defensive line held. And finally, the Indians gave up. Hearing news that Custer had finally been surrounded with no help coming, Custer and his entire force were finally massacred. The Indians would continue to harass the Reno-Benteen defensive line until finally, on June 27th, battalion under General Perry finally arrived to reinforce their line. But by that time it was too late. Custer was dead and the attack had failed. In total, 274 Americans would die and 49 wounded. The coalition Indians lost about 160 men and 100 wounded. But while this was the great victory that Sitting Bull and God had promised, the people, they went into the field of Custer's command and disobeyed Sitting Bull's orders to stop. And as a result, though they had won this great battle, the outcome of the war would not be in their favor. And the 7th Cavalry would get their revenge eventually.
Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and check me out over on Patreon. The link is in the description.